fleeing ISIS from coming here, deport 11 million people, and wall off America's southern border. Is the best way to make America great again to isolate it from much of the rest of the world?
We are not talking about isolation. We're talking about security. We're not talking about religion. We're talking about security. Our country is out of control. People are pouring across the southern border. I will build a wall. It'll be a great wall. People will not come in unless they come in legally. Drugs will not pour through that wall. As far as other people, like in the migration, where they're going, tens of thousands of people having cell phones with ISIS flags on them, I don't think so, Wolf. They're not coming to this country. And if I'm president, and if Obama has brought some to this country, they are leaving. They're going. They're gone.
Governor Bush, you called Mr. Trump unhinged when he proposed banning non-American Muslims from the United States. Why is that unhinged?
Well, first of all, we need to destroy ISIS in the caliphate. That should be our objective. The refugee issue will be solved if we destroy ISIS there, which means we need to have a no-fly zone, safe zones there for refugees, and to build a military force. We need to embed our forces, our troops, inside the Iraqi military. We need to arm directly the Kurds. And all of that has to be done in concert with the Arab nations. And if we're going to ban all Muslims, how are we going to get them to be part of a coalition to destroy ISIS? The Kurds are the greatest fighting force and our strongest allies. They're Muslim. Look, this is not a serious proposal. In fact, it will push the Muslim world, the Arab world, away from us at a time when we need to re-engage with them to be able to create a strategy to destroy ISIS. So Donald, is great at the one-liners, but he's a chaos candidate, and he'd be a chaos president. He would not be the commander-in-chief we need to keep our country safe.
Mr. Trump.
Jeff doesn't really believe I'm unhinged. He said that very simply because he has failed in this campaign. It's been a total disaster. Nobody cares. And frankly, I'm the most solid person up here. I built a tremendous company, and all I want to do is make America great again. I don't want our country to be taken away from us, and that's what's happening. The policies that we've suffered under other presidents have been a disaster for our country. We want to make America great again, and Jeb, in all fairness, he doesn't believe that.
Look, he mentioned me. I can talk. This is the problem. Banning all Muslims will make it harder for us to do exactly what we need to do, which is to destroy ISIS. We need a strategy. We need to get the lawyers off the back of the war fighters. Right now, under President Obama, we've created this standard that is so high that it's impossible to be successful in fighting ISIS. We need to engage with the Arab world to make this happen. It is not a serious proposal to say that to the people that you're asking for their support, that they can't even come to the country to even engage in a dialogue with us. That's not a serious proposal. We need a serious leader to deal with this, and I believe I'm that guy.
Senator Rubio, I'm going to go to Senator Rubio and get his thoughts. You have said banning Muslims is unconstitutional, but according to a recent ABC News Washington Post poll, a majority of Republicans support Mr. Trump's idea. Why are they wrong?
Well, I understand why they feel that way, because this president hasn't kept us safe. The problem is we had an attack in San Bernardino, and we were paying attention to the most important issue we have faced in this country in a decade, since 9/11, and then all the talk was about this proposal, which isn't going to happen. But this is what's important to do. We must deal frontally with this threat of radical Islamists, especially from ISIS. This is the most sophisticated terror group that has ever threatened the world or the United States of America. They are actively recruiting Americans. The attacker in San Bernardino was an American citizen. Born and raised in this country, he was a health inspector, had a newborn child, and left all that behind to kill 14 people. We also understand that this is a group that's growing in its governance of territory. It's not just Iraq and Syria. They are now a predominant group in Libya. They are beginning to pop up in Afghanistan. They are increasingly involved now in attacks in Yemen. They have Jordan in their sights. This group needs to be confronted with serious proposals. And this is a very significant threat we face, and the president has left us unsafe. He spoke the other night to the American people to reassure us. I wish he hadn't spoken at all. He made things worse. Because what he basically said was, we are going to keep doing what we're doing now, and what we are doing now is not working.
Hugh Hewitt, you have a question.
Senator Cruz, You've said you disagree with Mr. Trump's policy. I don't want a cage match. You've tweeted you don't want a cage match, but Republican primary voters deserve to know, with the kind of specificity and responsiveness you delivered in your 9 Supreme Court arguments, how you disagree with Mr. Trump. Will you spell that out with us?
Well, listen, Hugh, everyone understands why Donald has suggested what he has. We're looking at a president who's engaged in this doublespeak, where he doesn't call radical Islamic terrorism by its name. Indeed, he gives a speech after the San Bernardino attack where his approach is to try to go after the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens rather than to keep us safe. And even worse, President Obama and Hillary Clinton are proposing bringing tens of thousands of Syrian refugees to this country when the head of the FBI has told Congress they cannot vet those refugees. I understand why Donald made that proposal. I introduced legislation in the Senate that I believe is more narrowly focused at the actual threat, which is radical Islamic terrorism. And what my legislation would do is suspend all refugees for 3 years from countries where ISIS or Al-Qaeda control substantial territory.
So you're saying you disagree because he's too broad and you're having narrow focus? Why do you disagree with him?
Well, you know, I'm reminded of what FDR's grandfather said. He said, all horse thieves are Democrats, but not all Democrats are horse thieves. In this instance, there are millions of peaceful Muslims across the world in countries like India where there is not the problems we are seeing in nations that are controlled, have territory controlled by Al-Qaeda or ISIS, and we should direct at the problem, focus on the problem, and defeat radical Islamic terrorism. It's not a war on a faith, it's a war on a political and theocratic ideology that seeks to murder us.
Carly Fiorina, this is the Christmas dinner debate. This will be the debate that Americans talk about at Christmas. And thus far, in the first 10 minutes, we haven't heard a lot about Ronald Reagan sitting on a hill. We've heard a lot about keeping Americans out and keeping Americans safe and everyone else out. Is this what you want the party to stand for?
What I think we need to stand for are solutions. I offer myself as a leader to the people of this country because I think they're looking for solutions, not lawyers arguing over laws or entertainers throwing out sound bites that draw media attention. We need to solve the problem. To solve the problem, we need to do something here at home and something over there in their caliphate. We need to deny them territory. But here at home, we need to do 2 fundamental things. Number 1, we need to recognize that technology has moved on. The Patriot Act was signed in 2001, roughly. The iPhone was invented in 2007. The iPad was invented in 2011. Snapchat and Twitter, all the rest of it, have been around just for several years. Technology has moved on and the terrorists have moved on with it. Let me tell you a story. Soon after 9/11, I got a phone call from the NSA. They needed help. I gave them help. I stopped a truckload of equipment. I had it turned around. It was escorted by the NSA into headquarters. We need the private sector's help because government is not innovating. Technology is running ahead by leaps and bounds. The private sector will help, just as I helped after 9/11, but they must be engaged and they must be asked. I will ask them. I know them.
Governor Christie. Americans are clearly more afraid today than at any time since 9/11. As you mentioned in your opening statement today in Los Angeles, 650 school children didn't go to 650,000 school children didn't go to school because of an email threat. This 2 weeks after an attack killed 14 people in San Bernardino. Is this the new normal? And if so, what steps would you take as President of the United States to ensure that fear does not paralyze America?
Wolf, unfortunately, it's the new normal under Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. The fact is that if you listen to Hillary Clinton the other day, what she said to the American people was, as regards to ISIS, my strategy would be just about the same as the president's. Just about the same as the president's? We have people across this country who are scared to death. Because I can tell you this, as a former federal prosecutor, if a Center for the Developmentally Disabled in San Bernardino, California, is now a target for terrorists, that means everywhere in America is a target for these terrorists. Now,
spent 7 years of my life in the immediate aftermath of September 11th doing this work. Working with the Patriot Act, working with our law enforcement, working with the surveillance community to make sure that we keep America safe. What we need to do, well, is restore those tools that have been taken away by the president and others. Restore those tools to the NSA and to our entire surveillance and law enforcement community. We need a president who's going to understand what actionable intelligence looks like and act on it. And we need a president and a cabinet who understands that the first and most important priority of the President of the United States is to protect the safety and security of Americans. As someone who has done it, I will make sure it gets done again.
Thank you. Governor Kasich. One of the killers in San Bernardino was an American who was not on anyone's watch list. How are you going to find that radicalized person and stop another such attack?
Well, first of all, Wolf, I said last February that we needed to have people on the ground, troops on the ground, in a coalition similar to what we had in the first Gulf War. I remember when the Egyptian ambassador to the United States stood in the Rose Garden and pledged Arab commitment to removing Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. Before we came out here tonight, I am told the Saudis have organized 34 countries who want to join in the battle against terrorism. First and foremost, we need to go and destroy ISIS. And we need to do this with our Arab friends and our friends in Europe. And when I see they have a climate conference over in Paris, they should have been talking about destroying ISIS because they are involved in virtually every country across this world. Now, you destroy ISIS in a coalition, you get joint intelligence with our European friends, and then here at home, there are things called the Joint Terrorism Task Force, headed by the FBI, and made up of local law enforcement, including state police. They need the tools, and the tools involve encryption, where we cannot hear what they're even planning. And when we see red flags, a father, a mother, a neighbor who said,
voted for a bill that President Obama signed into law just this past June that made it harder for the government to access Americans' phone records. In light of the San Bernardino attack, was your vote a mistake?
Well, Dana, the premise of your question is not accurate. I'm very proud to have joined with conservatives in both the Senate and the House to reform how we target bad guys. And what the USA Freedom Act did is it did two things. Number one, it ended the federal government's bulk collection of phone metadata of millions of law-abiding citizens. But number two, and the second half of it that is critical, it strengthened the tools of national security and law enforcement to go after terrorists. It gave us greater tools, and we are seeing those tools work right now in San Bernardino. And in particular, what it did is the prior program only covered a relatively narrow slice of phone calls. When you had a terrorist, you could only search a relatively narrow slice of numbers, primarily landlines. So now we have cell phones, now we have internet phones, now we have the phones the terrorists are likely to use, and the focus of law enforcement is on targeting the bad guys. You know what the Obama administration keeps getting wrong is whenever anything bad happens, they focus on law-abiding citizens instead of focusing on the bad guys. We need to focus on radical Islamic terrorists, and we need to stop them before they carry out acts of terror.
Thank you. Senator Rubio, Senator Cruz is right. There was bipartisan support for that, but you voted against it. So is Senator Cruz wrong?
He is, and so are those that voted for it. There were some that voted for it because they wanted to keep it alive, and they were afraid the whole program would expire. Here's the world we live in. This is a radical jihadist group that is increasingly sophisticated in its ability, for example, to radicalize American citizens, in its ability to exploit loopholes in our legal immigration system, in its ability to capture and hold territory in the Middle East, as I outlined earlier, in multiple countries. This is not just the most capable, it is the most sophisticated terror threat we have ever faced. We are now at a time when we need more tools, not less tools. And that tool we lost, the metadata program, was a valuable tool that we no longer have at our disposal.
Senator Cruz?
Well, I would note that Marco knows what he's saying isn't true. Mark Levin wrote a column last week that says that the attack ads his super PAC is running, they're saying the same thing, that they are knowingly false, and they are in fact Alinsky-like attacks like Barack Obama. And the reason is simple. What he knows is that the old program covered 20 to 30% of phone numbers to search for terrorists. The new program covers nearly 100%. That gives us greater ability to stop acts of terrorism. And he knows that's the case.
Dana, may I interject?
Let me be very
please
careful in
respond.
answering this, because I don't think national television in front of 15 million people is the place to discuss classified information. So let me just be very clear. There is nothing that we are allowed to do under this bill that we could not do before. This bill did, however, take away a valuable tool that allowed the National Security Agency and other intelligence agencies to quickly and rapidly access phone records and match them up with other phone records to see who terrorists have been calling. Because I promise you, the next time there is an attack on this country, the first thing people are going to want to know is, why didn't we know about it and why didn't we stop it? And the answer better not be because we didn't have access to records or information that would have allowed us to identify these killers before they attacked.
Senator Paul, I know this has been a very big issue for you. You hear many of your colleagues are calling for increased surveillance by law enforcement. You call that hogwash. Why is that hogwash?
You know, I think Marco gets it completely wrong. We are not any safer through the bulk collection of all Americans' records. In fact, I think we're less safe. We get so distracted by all of the information, we're not spending enough time getting specific information on terrorists. The other thing is the one thing that might have stopped Senator Bernardino, that might have stopped 9/11, would have been stricter controls on those who came here. And Marco has opposed at every point increased security, border security for those who come to our country. On his Gang of Eight bill, he would have liberalized immigration, but he did not, and he steadfastly opposed any new border security requirements for refugees or students. Last week, I introduced another bill saying we need more security, we need more scrutiny. Once again, Marco opposed this. So Marco can't have it both ways. He thinks he wants to be this, oh, I'm great and strong on national defense, but he's the weakest of all the candidates on immigration. He is the one for an open border that is leaving us defenseless. If we want to defend the country, we have to defend against those who are coming in. And Marco has more of an allegiance to Chuck Schumer and to the liberals than he does to conservative policy.
I want to thank Rand for another 30 seconds because, number one, what he's pointing to is a bill last week, an amendment he voted for that only 10 people voted for. You know why? Because it's not focused on terrorists. It would have banned anyone from coming here. Someone from Taiwan would not have been able to come here as a tourist. Number two, this program, this metadata program, is actually more strict than what a regular law enforcement agency has now. If a regular law enforcement agency wants your phone records, all they have to do is issue a subpoena. But now the intelligence agency is not able to quickly gather records and look at them to see who these terrorists are calling. And the terrorist that attacked us in San Bernardino was an American citizen, born and raised in this country. And I bet you we wish we would have had access to 5 years of his records so we could see who he was working with.
Governor Christie, you heard.
Since I was mentioned in the question, can I respond?
Go ahead, please.
Marco still misunderstands the immigration issue. What I put forward was an amendment that would have temporarily halted immigration from high-risk terrorist countries, but it would have started it up, but I want them to go through global entry, which is a program where we do background checks. The thing is that every terrorist attack we've had since 9/11 has been legal immigration. Marco wants to expand that. I want more rules, more scrutiny, and to defend the country, you have to defend the border.
Senator, we're going to talk about immigration in a while. But Dr.
Can I get another 30 seconds? You mentioned me again.
You heard Senator Paul, Senator Cruz talk about how important it is to protect Americans' privacy, even in a time of grave danger. Why? What's wrong with that?
Listen, I want to talk to the audience at home for a second. If your eyes are glazed over like mine, this is what it's like to be on the floor of the United States Senate. I mean, endless debates about how many angels on the head of a pin from people who've never had to make a consequential decision in an executive position. The fact is, for 7 years, I had to make these decisions after 9/11. Make a decision about how to proceed forward with an investigation or how to pull back, whether to use certain actionable intelligence or whether not to. And yet they continue to debate about this bill and the subcommittee and what. Nobody in America cares about that. What they care about is, are we going to have a president who actually knows what they're doing to make these decisions? And for the 7 years afterwards, New Jersey was threatened like no other region in this country. And what we did was we took actions within the Constitution to make sure that law enforcement had all the information they needed. We prosecuted 2 of the biggest terrorism cases in the world and stopped Fort Dix. from being attacked by 6 American radicalized Muslims from a mosque in New Jersey because we worked with the Muslim American community to get intelligence, and we used the Patriot Act to get other intelligence to make sure we did those cases. This is the difference between actually having been a federal prosecutor, actually doing something, and just spending your life as one of 100 debating it. Let's talk about how we do this, not about which bill each one of these guys likes more. The American people don't care about that.
Thank you. Dr. Carson, you're in favor of monitoring mosques and schools where there is anti-American sentiment. What do you consider anti-American?
Well, first of all, let me just complain a little bit. It's the first time I've spoken, and several people have had multiple questions, so please try to pay attention to that. Now, as far as monitoring is concerned, what my point is, we need to make sure that any place, I don't care whether it's a mosque, a school, a supermarket, a theater, it doesn't matter. If there are a lot of people getting there, engaging in radicalizing activities, then we need to be suspicious of it. We have to get rid of all this PC stuff. And people are worried about somebody's going to say that I'm Islamophobic or what have you. This is craziness because we are at war. That's why I asked Congress, go ahead and declare the war. We need to be on a war footing. We need to understand that our nation is in grave danger. You know, what the Muslim Brotherhood said in the explanatory memorandum that was discovered during the Holy Land Foundation trial is that they will take advantage of our PC attitude to get us. And we have to be better than this. We have to be smarter than they are.
Dr. Carson, who was right in that little debate we just heard between Senator Rubio and Senator Paul?
I think you have to ask them about that. I don't want to get in between them. Let them fight.
Wolf, these...
Hold on a second. We have a lot more to come, and everybody's going to have their full opportunities. Governor Bush, 6 days after 9/11, your brother visited a mosque and said, quote, Islam is peace. The conversation tonight is about banning Muslims and surveillance of mosques. Are President Bush's words still relevant in today's Republican Party?
They are relevant if we want to destroy ISIS, if we want to destroy radical Islamic terrorism. We can't disassociate ourselves from peace-loving Muslims. If we expect to do this on our own, we will fail. But if we do it in unison with people who also are at risk and threatened by Islamic radical terrorism, we'll be far more successful. Look, the FBI has the tools necessary to monitor un-American activities in our country. It goes on. We shouldn't even be talking about it, to be honest with you, out in the public. Of course they have those capabilities, and we should make sure that we give the FBI, the NSA, our intelligence communities, all the resources they need to keep us safe. But the main thing we should be focused on is a strategy to destroy ISIS. And I laid out a plan at the Reagan Library before the tragedy of Paris and before San Bernardino to do just that. It requires leadership. It's not filing an amendment and calling it success. It is developing a strategy, leading the world, funding it to make sure that we have a military that's second to none, and doing the job, and making sure that we destroy ISIS there. That's how you keep America safe.
Ms. Fiorina, as you pointed out, you were a CEO in Silicon Valley on 9/11. Companies there, they say they won't help the FBI now crack encrypted communications from ISIS. Should they be forced to?
You know, listening to this conversation, let me just say, we have a lot of argument about laws, but none of it solves the problem.
Into oblivion, testing whether, quote, sand can glow in the dark. Does that mean leveling the ISIS capital of Raqqa in Syria, where there are hundreds of thousands of civilians?
What it means is using overwhelming air power to utterly and completely destroy ISIS. To put things in perspective, in the first Persian Gulf War, we launched roughly 1,100 air attacks a day. We carpet bombed them for 37 days, saturation bombing, after which our troops went in and in a day and a half mopped up what was left of the Iraqi army. Right now, Obama is launching between 15 and 30 air attacks a day. It is photo-op foreign policy. We need to use overwhelming air power. We need to be arming the Kurds. We need to be fighting and killing ISIS where they are. And let me go back to the earlier discussion a minute ago. It's not a lack of competence that is preventing the Obama administration from stopping these attacks. It is political correctness. We didn't monitor the Facebook posting of the female San Bernardino terrorist because the Obama DHS thought it would be inappropriate. She made a public call to jihad and they didn't target it. The Tsarnaev brothers, the elder brother, made a public call to jihad and the Obama administration didn't target it. Nidal Hassan communicated with Anwar al-Awlaki, a known radical cleric, asked about waging jihad against his fellow soldiers. The problem is, because of political correctness, the Obama administration, like a lot of folks here, want to search everyone's cell phones and emails and not focus on the bad guys, and political correctness is killing people.
Thank you. To be clear, Senator Cruz, would you carpet bomb Raqqa, the ISIS capital, where there are a lot of civilians? Yes or no?
You would carpet bomb where ISIS is, not a city, but the location of the troops. You use air power directed, and you have embedded special forces to direct the air power. But the object isn't to level a city. The object is to kill the ISIS terrorists, to make it... Listen, ISIS is gaining strength because the perception is that they're winning, and President Obama fuels that perception. That will change when militants across the globe see that when you join ISIS, that you are giving up your life, you are signing your death warrant, and we need a president who is focused on defeating every single ISIS terrorist and protecting the homeland, which should be the first priority.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Rubio, you've been critical of Senator Cruz's strategy. You say his voting record doesn't match his rhetoric. Why?
Well, let me begin by saying that we have to understand who ISIS is. ISIS is a radical Sunni group. They cannot just be defeated through airstrikes. Airstrikes are a key component of defeating them, but they must be defeated on the ground by a ground force. And that ground force must be primarily made up of Sunni Arabs themselves. Sunni Arabs that reject them ideologically and confront them militarily. We will have to embed additional American special operators alongside them to help them with training, to help them conduct special missions, and to help improve the airstrikes. The airstrikes are important, but we need to have an air force capable of it. And because of the budget cuts we are facing in this country, we are going to be left with the oldest and the smallest air force we have ever had. We have to reverse those cuts, in addition to the cuts to our Navy, and in addition to the cuts to our Army as well. And beyond that, I would say we must win the information war against ISIS. Every war we have ever been involved in has had a propaganda informational aspect to it. ISIS is winning the propaganda war. They are recruiting people, including Americans, to join them, with the promise that they're joining this great apocalyptic movement that is going to defeat the West. We have to show what life is really like in ISIS territory, and we have to show them why ISIS is not invincible by going out and conducting these attacks and publicizing them to those who they recruit.
Because I asked the question, Senator, because you said this. You said he, referring to Senator Cruz, voted against the Defense Authorization Act every year that it came up, and I assume that if he voted against it, he would veto it as president. That's the bill that funds our troops.
That is accurate. 3 times he voted against the Defense Authorization Act, which is a bill that funds the troops. It also, by the way, funds the Iron Dome and other important programs. And I have to assume that if you vote against it in the Senate, you would also veto it as president. He has also supported, by the way, a budget that is called the containment budget. And it is a budget that would radically reduce the amount of money we spend on our military. You can't carpet bomb ISIS if you don't have planes and bombs to attack them with. And if we continue those cuts that we're doing now, not to mention additional cuts, we are going to be left with the oldest and the smallest air force this country has ever had. And that leaves us less safe.
Senator Cruz.
Well, you know, Marco has continued these attacks, and he knows they're not true. Yes, it is true that I voted against the National Defense Authorization Act because when I campaigned in Texas, I told voters in Texas that I would oppose the federal government having the authority to detain U.S. citizens permanently with no due process. I've repeatedly supported an effort to take that out of that bill, and I honored that campaign commitment. But more broadly, you know, the notion Marco is suggesting that somehow he also has tossed more than a few insults this direction. Let's be absolutely clear. ISIS and radical Islamic terrorism will face no more determined foe than I will be. We will utterly destroy them by targeting the bad guys. And one of the problems with Marco's foreign policy is he has far too often supported Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama undermining governments in the Middle East that have helped radical Islamic terrorists. We need to focus on killing the bad guys, not getting stuck in Middle Eastern civil wars that don't keep America safe.
Senator Rubio.
Yeah, 3 points of distinction. The first is, if you're an American citizen and you decide to join up with ISIS, we're not going to read you your Miranda rights. You're going to be treated as an enemy combatant, a member of an army attacking this country. Number two, we do need our defense capabilities. It is a fact that the cuts we are facing today and the cuts that Senator Cruz would have supported would leave us with an even smaller Air Force and a smaller Navy than the one we are going to be left with. And the final point that I would make is Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's strategy is to lead from behind. It sounds like what he's outlining is not to lead at all. We cannot continue to outsource foreign policy. We must lead. We are the most powerful nation in the world. We need to begin to act like it again.
We're going to have much more on this. But I want to move now back to Mr. Trump.
This legislation,
hold on.
This legislation on
We have a lot.
Deserves a little more attention.
We have a lot to discuss. I want to move to Mr. Trump right now. We have a question on this war against ISIS and how you would fight and win this war. Here's the question from Facebook. Listen to this.
I'm Josh Jacob from Georgia Tech. Recently, Donald Trump mentioned that we must kill the families of ISIS members. However, this violates the principle of distinction between civilians and combatants in international law. So my question is, how would intentionally killing innocent civilians set us apart from ISIS?
Mr. Trump.
We have to be much tougher. We have to be much stronger than we've been. We have people that know what's going on. You take a look at just the attack in California the other day. There were numerous people, including the mother, that knew what was going on. They saw pipe bombs sitting all over the floor. They saw ammunition all over the place. They knew exactly what was going on. When you had the World Trade Center go, people were put into planes that were friends, family, girlfriends, and they were put into planes and they were sent back, for the most part, to Saudi Arabia. They knew what was going on. They went home and they wanted to watch their boyfriends on television. I would be very, very firm with families. And frankly, that will make people think. Because they may not care much about their lives, but they do care, believe it or not, about their families' lives.
Donald, Governor Bush, this is another example of the lack of seriousness. Look, this is troubling because we're at war. They've declared war on us, and we need to have a serious strategy to destroy ISIS. But the idea that that is a solution to this is just crazy. It makes no sense to suggest this. Look, 2 months ago, Donald Trump said that ISIS was not our fight, just 2 months ago. He said that Hillary Clinton would be a great negotiator with Iran. And he gets his foreign policy experience from the shows. That is not a serious kind of candidate. We need someone that thinks this through, that can lead our country to safety and security.
Mr. Trump.
Look, the problem is, we need toughness. Honestly, I think Jeb is a very nice person. He's a very nice person, but we need tough people. We need toughness. We need intelligence, and we need tough. Jeb said when they come across the southern border, they come as an act of love.
You said in September 30th that ISIS was not a
Am I talking or are you talking, Jeb?
I'm talking right now. I'm talking.
You can go back. You're not talking. You interrupted me,
September 30th,
Jeb. Are you going to
you said
apologize, Jeb? No. Am I allowed to finish?
Yes, one at a time. Go ahead,
Am I allowed to finish?
Go ahead, Mr. Trump.
So, again, I know you're trying to build up your energy,
Please.
Jeb, but it's not working.
One at a time.
Look. We need a toughness. We need strength. We're not respected as a nation anymore. We don't have that level of respect that we need. And if we don't get it back fast, we're just going to go weaker, and just disintegrate. We can't allow that to happen. We need strength. We don't have it. When Jeb comes out and he talks about the border, and I saw it, and I was witness to it, and so was everyone else, and I was standing there, they come across as an act of love. He's saying the same thing right now with radical Islam. And we can't have that in our country. It just won't work. We need strength.
Governor Bush.
Donald, you're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen. And I do have the strength. Leadership is not about attacking people and disparaging people. Leadership is about creating a serious strategy to deal with the threat of our time. And I laid out that strategy before the attacks in Paris and before the attacks in San Bernardino, and it is the way the way forward. We need to increase our military spending. We need to deal with a no-fly zone in Syria, a safe zone. We need to focus on building a military that is second to none so that we can destroy Islamic terrorism.
With Jeb's attitude, we will never be great again. That I can tell you. We will never be great again.
All right, Hugh Hewitt at Danabash. Hugh, go ahead with the next question.
Dr. Carson,
We have to be much tougher. We have to be much stronger than we've been. We have people that know what's going on. You take a look at just the attack in California the other day. There were numerous people, including the mother, that knew what was going on. They saw pipe bombs sitting all over the floor. They saw ammunition all over the place. They knew exactly what was going on. When you had the World Trade Center go, people were put into planes that were friends, family, girlfriends, and they were put into planes and they were sent back, for the most part, to Saudi Arabia. They knew what was going on. They went home and they wanted to watch their boyfriends on television. I would be very, very firm with families. And frankly, that will make people think. Because they may not care much about their lives, but they do care, believe it or not, about their families' lives.
Donald, this is
Governor Bush.
This is another example of the lack of seriousness. Look, this is troubling because we're at war. They've declared war on us, and we need to have a serious strategy to destroy ISIS. But the idea that that is a solution to this is just crazy. It makes no sense to suggest this. Look, 2 months ago, Donald Trump said that ISIS was not our fight. Just 2 months ago. He said that Hillary Clinton would be a great negotiator with Iran. And he gets his foreign policy experience from the shows. That is not a serious kind of candidate. We need someone that thinks this through, that can lead our country to safety and security.
Mr. Trump.
Look, the problem is, we need toughness. Honestly, I think Jeb is a very nice person. He's a very nice person, but we need tough people. We need toughness. We need intelligence, and we need tough. Jeb said when they come across the southern border, they come as an act of love.
You said in September 30th that ISIS was not a
Am I talking or are you talking, Jeb?
I'm talking right now. I'm talking.
You can go back. You're not talking. You interrupted me,
September 30th,
Are you going to
you said
apologize, Jeb? No. Am I allowed to finish?
Yes, one at a time. Go ahead.
Am I allowed to finish?
Go ahead, Mr. Trump.
So,
Little bit
again,
of
I brought it up. I know you're trying to build
Bush.
up your energy,
Please.
Jeb, but it's not working.
One at a
very
time.
well. Look. We need a toughness. We need strength. We're not respected as a nation anymore. We don't have that level of respect that we need. And if we don't get it back fast, we're just going to go weaker, and just disintegrate. We can't allow that to happen. We need strength. We don't have it. When Jeb comes out and he talks about the border, and I saw it, and I was witness to it, and so was everyone else, and I was standing there, they come across as an act of love. He's saying the same thing right now with radical Islam. And we can't have that in our country. It just won't work. We need strength.
Governor Bush.
Donald, you're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen. And I do have the strength. Leadership is not about attacking people and disparaging people. Leadership is about creating a serious strategy to deal with the threat of our time. And I laid out that strategy before the attacks in Paris and before the attacks in San Bernardino, and it is the way forward. We need to increase our military spending. We need to deal with a no-fly zone in Syria, a safe zone. We need to focus on building a military that is second to none so that we can destroy Islamic terrorism.
With Jeb's attitude, we will never be great again. That I can tell you. We will never be great again.
All right, Hugh Hewitt at Danabash. Hugh, go ahead with the next question.
Dr. Carson,
various people that frankly, if they were there and if we could have spent that $4 trillion in the United States to fix our roads, our bridges, and all of the other problems, our airports, and all of the other problems we have, we would have been a lot better off. I can tell you that right now. We have done a tremendous disservice, not only to the Middle East, we've done a tremendous disservice to humanity. The people that have been killed, the people that have been wiped away, and for what? It's not like we had victory. It's a mess. The Middle East is totally destabilized, a total and complete mess. I wish we had the $4 trillion or $5 trillion. I wish it was spent right here in the United States on our schools, hospitals, roads, airports, and everything else that are all falling apart.
That is exactly what President Obama said.
Go ahead.
That's exactly what President Obama has said. I'm amazed to hear that from a Republican presidential candidate. But let's just start with who got it wrong. Who really got it wrong? Hillary Clinton has gotten every foreign policy challenge wrong. The gimmicky red reset button with Vladimir Putin. Recall that she called Bashar al-Assad a positive reformer, and then she opened an embassy. And then later she said over and over and over again, Bashar al-Assad must go, although she wasn't prepared to do anything about it. Recall that Hillary Clinton was all for toppling Muammar Gaddafi, then didn't listen to her own people on the ground. And of course, when she lied about the terrorist attack at Benghazi, she invited
What the heck is she
more
talking
terrorist
about?
attacks.
Thank you, Mr. Trump.
Well, there's nothing to respond to. People feel differently. I mean, the fact is Benghazi was a disaster because of Libya. Everything just fell into place. It could not have been worse. What do we have now? We have nothing. We've spent $3 trillion and probably much more. They have no idea what we spent. Thousands and thousands of lives. We have nothing. Wounded warriors all over the place who I love. We have nothing for it. And by the way, and Ben said, and correctly, and I'm not saying this is a knock, because this is one of the finest men. You're not going to find a finer man. But I've been talking about oil for 3 years. I've been saying, take the oil, take the oil. I didn't say just bomb it. I said take it and use it and distribute it so that the wounded warriors and people. But I've been saying this now for many years. Now all of a sudden everybody's saying take the oil. It wasn't so fashionable to take the oil 6 months ago. I've been saying it for years.
Dr. Carson, is the Middle East, Dr. Carson, is the Middle East better off?
Where there was a battle over amnesty, and some chose, like Senator Rubio, to stand with Barack Obama and Chuck Schumer and support a massive amnesty plan. Others chose to stand with Jeff Sessions and Steve King and the American people and secure the border. And then let me mention, this issue is actually directly connected to what we've been talking about, because the front line with ISIS isn't just in Iraq and Syria, it's also in Kennedy Airport and the Rio Grande. Border security is national security. And you know, one of the most troubling aspects of the Rubio-Schumer Gang of Eight bill was that it gave President Obama blanket authority to admit refugees, including Syrian refugees, without mandating any background checks whatsoever. Now, we've seen what happened in San Bernardino. When you're letting people in, when the FBI can't vet them, it puts American citizens at risk. And I tell you, if I'm elected president, we will secure the border. We will triple the Border Patrol. We will build a wall that works, and I'll get Donald Trump to pay for it.
I'll do it. Daniel.
Thank you. Senator Rubio, please.
Yeah, a couple points. In 2013, we had never faced a crisis like the Syrian refugee crisis now. Up until that point, a refugee meant someone fleeing oppression, fleeing communism, like it is in my community. As far as Ted's record, I'm always puzzled by his attack on this issue. Ted, you support legalizing people who are in this country illegally. Ted Cruz supported a number of H-1B visas, the guest workers that are allowed into this country, and Ted supports doubling the number of green cards. So I think what's important for us to understand is there is a way forward on this issue that we can bring our country together on. And when I'm president, I will do it. And it will begin by bringing illegal immigration under control and proving it to the American people.
Senator Cruz.
Look, I understand that Marco wants to raise confusion. It is not accurate what he just said, that I supported legalization. Indeed, I led the fight against his legalization and amnesty bill. And you know, there was one commentator that put it this way, that for Marco to suggest our record's the same, it is like suggesting the fireman and the arsonist have the same record because they're both at the scene of the fire. He was fighting to grant amnesty and not to secure the border. I was fighting to secure the border. And this also goes to trust. Listen, on campaign trails, candidates all the time make promises. You know, Marco said he learned that the American people didn't trust the federal government.
No, Dana,
he campaigned in Florida promising to lead the fight against amnesty. He campaigned promising to lead the fight against amnesty.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is why the American people are
Does Ted Cruz rule out ever legalizing people that are in this country illegally now?
Senator Cruz?
I have never supported legalization.
Do you rule it out?
I have never supported legalization, and I do not intend to support legalization. And let me tell you how you do this. What you do is you enforce the law. What you do is you enforce the law.
Ms. Fiorina, please wait your turn. We're going to get to you on this. Go ahead,
Sorry, you haven't gotten to me. This is
Senator
why
Cruz,
the nation is fed up with the political class.
What you do is you enforce the law. I've laid out a very, very detailed immigration plan on my website, tedcruz.org. It's 11 pages, existing federal law, and in particular the question of what to do with people who are here now. You enforce the law. That means you stop the Obama administration's policy of releasing criminal illegal aliens. Do you know how many illegal aliens Bill Clinton deported? 12 million. Do you know how many illegal aliens George W. Bush deported? 10 million. We can enforce the laws, and if we secure the border, that solves the problem. And as president, I will solve this problem and secure the border.
Mr. Trump, you like to say that you restarted this conversation in the campaign.
I think I did.
So who do you side with? Who do you side with in this? Senator Rubio or Senator
I have
Cruz?
a very hard-line position. We have a country or we don't have a country. People that have come into our country illegally, they have to go. They have to come back in through a legal process. I want a strong border. I do want a wall. Walls do work. You just have to speak to the folks in Israel. Walls work if they're properly constructed. I know how to build. Believe me, I know how to build. But I feel a very, very strong bind, and really I'm bound to this country. We either have a border or we don't. People can come into the country. We welcome people to come in, but they have to come in legally.
Thank you. It's Governor Bush, listening to this, do you think this is the tone, this immigration debate, that Republicans need to take to win back Hispanics into your party, especially states like where we are in Nevada that has a pretty large Hispanic community?
No, it isn't, but it's an important subject to talk about for sure. And I think people have good ideas on this. Clearly, we need to secure the border. Coming here legally needs to be a lot easier than coming here illegally. If you don't have that, you don't have the rule of law. We now have a national security consideration, public health issues. We have an epidemic of heroin overdoses in all places in this country because of the ease bringing heroin in. We have to secure the border. It is a serious undertaking, and yeah, we do need more fencing, and we do need to use technology, and we do need more border control, and we need to have better cooperation, by the way, with local law enforcement. There are 800,000 cops on the beat. They ought to be trained to be the eyes and ears for law enforcement, for the threat against terror, as well as for immigration. This is a serious challenge, and if we can get it right, yeah, we'll start winning votes again. The real problem isn't anybody on this stage. The real problem is Barack Obama has had 6 years to advocate a position to fix this, and he's done nothing. The Congress has funded these programs of building more fencing and doing all this, and he hasn't done it. He wants to maintain it as a wedge issue, and so does Hillary Clinton. Republicans need to fix it, and when we do, we'll be better off.
Governor, thank you very much. Dr. Carson, you recently visited a refugee camp in Jordan, and you deemed it, your words, really quite nice, saying the people there didn't want to come to the United States. Do you think these camps are a long-term solution to the problem of Syrian refugees?
Well, it was very interesting having an opportunity to talk to the Syrians themselves, and I asked them, what do you want? What is your supreme desire? Their supreme desire was to be settled back in their own country. I said, what can Americans and other countries do? They said, support the efforts of those who are trying to provide safety for us, including the Jordanians. Of course, they had a brand new hospital, for instance, that was unstaffed because there wasn't enough money to do it. But here's what's really neat. If you go into Hasaka province in northeastern Syria, that's an area that's as big as Lebanon. It's controlled by the Kurds, the Christians, and the moderate Sunnis. And there are airstrips and hotels. You could settle a lot of people there. All we would have to do is be willing to provide them with some weaponry, some defensive weaponry. And we seem to be afraid to give the Kurds weaponry. We like to send it for some strange reason through Baghdad, and then they only get a tenth of it. And if we would support them, we have a perfect ideal there. We don't need to set this up as we either take a bunch of refugees who will be infiltrated with terrorists. I guarantee you, for them not to be, would to be terrorist malpractice. And we need to choose the right choice, not these false choices.
Senator Paul, you oppose letting in Syrian refugees at this time into the United States. The U.S. has already accepted 2,000 Syrian refugees, including 13 living here in Las Vegas right now. Would you send them back? What would you do with these people?
You know, I think we need to set the record straight on this, because I think Marco misspoke about the bill. On the Gang of 8 bill, there was no provisions really for extra scrutiny or safety for refugees. At the time the bill came up, 2 Iraqi refugees came to my hometown, Bowling Green, Kentucky. Their fingerprints were on a bomb from Iraq. They were in the database, but we didn't pick them up. We relocated them here, put them in government housing, got them on food stamps, and we began providing for them, but we didn't have adequate security. On the Gang of 8 bill, on Marco's bill, we had an opportunity. There was a conservative consensus for an amendment I put forward called Trust But Verify that would have strengthened border security on both refugees, students, and those coming here. And Marco sided and was, I guess, more sympathetic to Chuck Schumer and to the president than he was to conservative principles. But this goes directly to national defense. And if he wants to run as a national defense conservative, he's got to explain why he hasn't stepped up to support border security.
Senator Rubio.
Well, as he's just admitted, the reason why those refugees were allowed in here because they messed up in how they used the actual database. They should have known. They didn't because they didn't run the actual law as it exists now. It didn't work well. As far as the refugees are concerned, it's not that America doesn't want to accept refugees, Wolf. It's that we may not be able to, because this is an issue we have to be 100% right on. If we allow 9,999 Syrian refugees into the United States, and all of them are good people, but we allow one person in who's an ISIS killer, we just get one person wrong, we got a serious problem. And there is not a single person in the national defense apparatus of this country that can guarantee you we're going to be 100% right. And that's why, as president, I'll take this very seriously.
Senator Paul, you didn't answer the question about the 2,000 Syrian refugees who are already here in the United States. Will you send them back or let them stay?
What my bill would do would be only for refugees going forward. So I haven't taken a position on sending anyone home, but I have taken the position that we have a lot of problems here in our country, and that one of the things that we do, charity is about giving your own money.